proper wet. I'll talk you through the basics real quick. We won't labour it because it's quite messy, but it'd be worth you just, once I've given you all the fundamentals, try and apply 1 or 2 or 3 of them when you can. If I talk about the touch points in the bike first, foot pegs and the handlebars, from a foot peg point of view, you should always try and ride on the balls of your feet. Okay, your feet should be very active on the foot peg. So it's not like I put my foot down and that's where it stays all day. My feet are moving around on the foot pegs all the time. In between corners even, all sorts, right? When you're on the balls of your feet, you move your center of mass back and it gets closer to the rear axle. So any pressure through the foot peg adds rear grip. And so we very consciously put pressure through the foot peg, sometimes dropping the heel even, to generate more rear wheel grip. If you watch Billy Balk ride, some of those guys, Billy's heels are like that sometimes, right? Because the lower you can get your center of mass hanging off the back of that foot peg, the more rear wheel grip it will generate. And that's a very useful skill and technique in slippery conditions like this. Try and ride up a slippery bank, you're back, you're leaning off the back of that foot peg, you get 10 times the grip you'd get if you don't do that. Okay, that's the first point. The second point is, what a lot of people do is they tuck their heel of the boot into the foot peg, and then because they don't want to rest it on the gear and brake lever, they turn their feet out. Problem is with this position, if you do that, you turn your knees out. That's how your legs work. If you turn your knees out, you're not holding onto the bike with your knees. So your arms are then doing all of the work, right? But when you're here, turn your toes in, hold onto the bike with your knees. Now my legs, the large muscle groups, are doing the work of stabilizing my body on the bike like a horse rider would. So crucial that you're active on the foot peg. Go in for my braking, back to the position, put force, consciously put force through that foot peg. Push that foot peg, push that foot peg. When you watch the guys ride again, you'll see there's always pressure going through a foot peg. Even if they've got one leg off dabbing, they'll place that leg back on the bike, then they'll dab on the other side, place it back, dab on the other side. It's rare that you see an expert or a pro rider, you know, feet off, doing all kinds of weird stuff. Okay, so that's the first point, is feet in the foot pegs. We do all of our braking before the corner. So if you feel you need braking mid-corner, you've come into that corner too fast. When you're out trail riding, oh well, that corner is messed up. But when you're on a track, you have the benefit where you can repeat and repeat and repeat and get better at it. So if you ride around here and you feel mid-corner, oh shit, brakes, try and remember that corner for the next lap, come in a bit slower, brake before the corner, slot your bike in actively into the position where you want it, and then coast and then accelerate at the right point where you feel confident to get back on the gas. Okay? Very important to hold on to the bike with your knees, because it'll use large muscle groups. Your arms won't do all the work, so you won't get so much arm pump. Then arms. So the correct riding position when stood up is balls on the feet, knees bent, toes turned in. You stick your bum back, like I'm going to go and sit on a chair, and I bring my body forward. Okay, you don't want to tuck your bum under your body like this. It's called a C-back. We don't want a C-back. We want that position. Chin over the handlebars, elbows nice and strong. That's the correct riding position. I'm not standing too tall. I'm crouching down a little bit so that I can take ups and downs equally. So I'm adding suspension to the bike, not only through my ankle articulation, but also my legs, my hips, everything else. Hands, these bikes are designed to ride one finger clutch, one finger braking. If you use any more than one finger on your front brake today especially, you're over braking. In conditions like these, the difference is when it's dry, I will be very front brake dominant. Probably 70% of all my braking, maybe 80% will be on the front brake. I'm always using both brakes. It's not that I'm only using the one or using the other. I'm very consciously also feathering this brake while I'm feathering that brake to try and slow down for the corner. But today you've got to be a bit careful, of course, because it's wet and it's slippery, and you lock that wheel up at any point and it'll just slide away from you because there's not enough grip to bring it back. Okay, so you're almost better off when you're starting corners on slippery terrain and slippery conditions like this, is very consciously almost take that finger off the front brake lever, just so that you don't accidentally, last minute, whoa, and then there's a slide. When the wheel's rolling, it has a much better chance of maintaining traction around the corner than if you're applying any resistance to it. So a lot of these corners, I'm actually actively telling myself while I'm coming into the corner, don't touch the front brake, don't touch the front brake, don't touch the front brake as I'm going through it, because the brain just does what it wants to do sometimes. You've got to force yourself, teach yourself not to do it. So there's one finger. You have to hold on to the bike with some fingers. So we never ride with 4 fingers like the road bike guys do, right? Because we're riding in off-road terrain. These levers move, and if I'm not holding on to the handlebar, my hands are going to come off the handlebar over the bumps and rough stuff. So always hold on. Turns out when you squeeze those 2 fingers, for most people it activates the front of the body, the bicep and the pec. And when you squeeze them, it tends to activate the tricep and the lat. So large muscle groups to hold on, small muscle groups to work the controls, generally speaking. Doesn't matter if you use your middle finger. Some pros do, Paul Bolton does. It's not the end of the world if you use different fingers. But try never to use more than 2 fingers. So even pros, when we compete, I will actually sometimes consciously, especially on the downhills when I'm holding my clutch in and I'm navigating a downhill, I will use 2 fingers on the clutch just to rest this finger. Because what goes down must go up, so I know I'm going down this downhill, and now I need my clutch finger to be fresh for the up, because I'm going to be working it. So I'll sometimes consciously rest the clutch finger using 2 fingers on the way down, pushing with my palms to maintain body weight, and then as soon as I transition and I'm going back up, take that finger off, back on 1 finger, and then I'm working the clutch and I'm doing my stuff that I need to do, you know. And try and save that finger as much as you can, but try and consciously not use 2 fingers if you can help it. You have a lot more dexterity with 1 finger. So when you start developing better clutch control, when we do front wheel lifts and all that stuff, you'll see it's minute movements of the clutch finger, 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter movements, and it takes a bit of time to teach your finger to make small movements like that. You know, your finger doesn't want to do it automatically straight away. So there's that. When I'm riding at the corner, I've done my braking, and now the corner is approaching. Think about what's happening. I'm going to ask the front tire to grip enough to change this mass's direction. So I need the front tire to bite. And the way that I'm giving the front tire the best chance of biting is I'm going to put weight forward on the bike. So I'm not just sitting down for the corner. I'm very actively thinking legs forward. So I want to sit on the very front of my seat if I can. Okay. The further forward I sit on the front of my seat, the more weight I'm loading up onto the front tire, the best chance the front tire has of facilitating that change of direction. I add more weight to the front tire by throwing a leg forward. That's why the motocross guys do it as well, right? There's not only are they getting their foot out of the way, because as I'm leaning the bike for the corner, the foot peg gets very close to the ground. If I don't take my foot off, it's going to be pulled back. So there's 2 things. Number 1, I get my foot to safety. And number 2, my leg is adding front wheel grip. That's why we're using the front wheel out. Don't particularly care if you've got it up here or wherever, as long as it's out of the way. When we're running enduro, very important to be a bit cautious with the heel. Because I'm going around the corner and I'm dragging my heel in the grass, very good chance of something in the grass, a rock, a tree stump, something, catches that heel, forces come through to your knee. If you're wearing a knee brace, forces will go to your hip, and it's injury time, you know. So try and get that leg out of the way, watch what's in the grass, all that sort of stuff, you know. It's also why we don't ride with our feet down here when we're sitting, because something grabs that toe, a rock or a tree stump, and it'll bend your foot back and break all your metatarsals in your foot. So always get the feet out of the way on top of the foot peg when I'm sitting down. Okay. When I need to use the rear brake when I'm seated, I lift my entire leg up and I hover it in the air. I'm holding on to the side panel here, and I'm using my ankle articulation to work the rear brake. Okay. It's hard on the leg, especially when the leg's tired. People use the whole leg to brake. That just locks the rear wheel up. You've got to hold the leg stable, and then just use that ankle articulation, feel where that brake is. And it takes time to develop feel. A lot of people say, yeah, but I can't feel it. Last night I'm reading a post about a guy who's used for 7 years the same Alpine Stars boots, and he's bought SG12s, and his post is, love the boots, they feel massively secure, but I've got no rear wheel, no rear brake feel, so I'm thinking of just sending them back. He's had them one day. But dude, it takes, even when I go from old SG12s to fresh SG12s, it takes about a week for me to get back to feeling that rear brake pedal the way it did before with my old boots, you know. It just takes time. So the way you develop feel, in my opinion, is the start of that is to be conscious about something, is to listen for it. Like think about how much pressure am I applying to my clutch lever. Think about how much pressure am I applying to my front brake lever. Think about which part of my finger am I using. Am I using the inner part or am I using the outer part, right? Because they apply pressure differently and you feel different sets of feelings depending on what you're doing. Am I pulling the lever on the outside? Am I pulling the lever on the inside? Is my finger sliding along the lever? What's happening? There's a lot going on. This lever, a lot going on with this lever, different hands. So it start thinking about what's going on, because that'll develop feel, conscious awareness, and then you can start, oh, okay, it's doing this, I'm going to do this to react to it, right? You're listening to the bike. Same with your suspension. Start feeling what the bike's doing. Think about what is it doing. Is the front doing the same as the rear? Is the front wheel going where I want it, or is it going wide, or is it tucking in and turning and oversteering? What's the rear doing? Is it skipping? Is it tracking? When I'm accelerating over the bumps, can I feel it driving, or is it hopping? Like, it's thinking about things. But I appreciate there's so much to think about. You've got to start somewhere, work on one thing at a time. Okay, but the goal is, over a period of time, as you get better, start thinking about each individual thing and it'll improve your ride. When I'm sitting in the correct position, so I've gone from this position, I've got legs forward, and I'm doing my turn. You'll see my body position is forward. Okay, my arms are bent. My chin is not far from where it was when I was standing up. See? So my head is almost like a chicken, it doesn't move a huge amount. Arms are bent. People that stand and then they sit down, nice and comfortable with straight arms, should never be comfortable with straight arms. Okay, when you're sitting in the wrong position, you're comfortable with straight arms. If I'm sitting in the right position, straight arms, I'll be like that. I'll not be comfortable. But just here, 6 inches back, yeah, nice and comfortable. So you really have to get onto the front of that seat. 2-3 inches makes a huge difference. If you don't believe me, ask your missus. Okay, it really does. I weigh 100 kilos. Moving 100 kilograms 2 inches forward has a phenomenal impact on the weight bias and the balance shift of the bike. The amount of additional weight I'm putting on the front wheel is unbelievable. Then, same thing, when I'm trying to ride up a slippery bank and the rear wheel's just spinning, I can use my body weight, move it right back, drop my legs here, or even forward, and I put as much weight on that rear tire as possible to give it the best chance of driving. So we're going to be using our body weight a lot. Same when we do figure of eights, we're using the body weight to counterbalance the bike left, counterbalance the bike right, shift weight forward, shift weight back. Your body weight is a very important tool through the foot pegs, through the seat to do certain things. Conditions like these, I prefer to stand up a bit more than normal. Well, I stand up a lot anyway. I try and stand up 80-90% of the time, because when your feet are through the foot pegs and it's off the bike just works better. When I'm sitting down anywhere on the bike, I'm generally weight biasing the bike either forward or back. If I'm here, it's more forward. If I'm sitting in the normal, even when I'm sitting in the very middle of the bike, believe it or not, I'm putting more weight on the rear tire than I am on the front. That's why your bike doesn't want to corner so well when you're sitting in the middle of the bike. That's why you need to sit there. But when you stand up, doing this is extremely easy to adapt to what the bike is doing. Like if I need it to steer, I do this. If I need it to accelerate, I do this, right? Just moving my body weight around forward and back, and I'm driving it. Balance. When I'm standing up, it does raise my center of gravity. Everybody says when you stand up on the pegs it lowers it. It doesn't. It raises it, but it feels like it lowers it. it's a counterintuitive thing. Because I'm controlling levers that are lower and closer to the ground, I can balance the bike better, I can respond to things a bit better, and also if I stand wide on the foot pegs, I'm increasing the leverage through the foot pegs on what I have on the bike, so you can just really balance and feel the bike a bit more. And the general rule of thumb is, I said hold on to the bike with your knees, but the general rule of thumb is when you're going faster, hold on to the bike with your knees. When you go really slow, give the bike space. So think trials, they go really slow, there's nothing for them to hold on to, so they're on the pegs balancing that bike. So think about that. If I'm going really slow, I'm like a trials rider. When I'm going fast, I'm more like a motocross rider. I've got to hold on to the bike with my knees to stabilize my weight, connect with the bike, make the suspension work. The other thing that happens when I'm not holding onto the bike with my knees is I'm kind of disconnected from the suspension a bit. The suspension will compress, and there's a delayed reaction between your body and the bike. So the bike will compress and you'll be delayed. By the time you're compressing, the bike's already trying to do something else again. But when I'm holding onto the bike with my knees, we're working together. Yeah? And so everything switches on a bit more when I'm holding onto the bike. When I'm leaning the bike, I'm forward, I'm leaning the bike, elbow integrity stays nice. I'm not dropping it. It's very common on the right hand. People like that chicken wing. We work the throttle with our wrist, not with our elbow. Okay? Maintain elbow integrity, work the throttle with your wrist. That's what you want to do. Straight arm like that. Put weight through that foot peg. When I'm leaning the bike this way, it's the outside foot peg. That weight will generate additional rear grip. So my bike will drive. My front wheel will steer because I'm sitting nice and forward. When I'm really leaning the bike, and we're not going to be really leaning the bike today unless we're doing berms because it's slippery, but when it's dry you can really lean the bike here. I'll go from a central position on the bike. When I'm leaning the bike, I'll actually move my body weight over and I'll put my weight back through the center line of the bike, because these bikes generate the most amount of grip with as much weight going through the knobblies. When I'm leaning, I'm taking weight off that center line, so I've got to put that weight back on the center line. That puts weight through the knobblies again, as much as it can, and then it just, again, it enhances and increases grip. Okay, so that's a lot. But I wanted to give it all to you. Everyone's at a different level. So I'll do a couple of demonstration laps where I would normally ride all of it stood up, and then I'll go down, stood up, where that whiteboard is up the top. I'm still standing up. I'll take that first left-hand corner, stood up, and then I'll sit down for the first right-hand corner where that cone's laying on the ground, and I'll sit down for the right, or sit down for the left. Because I'm already sitting down, up the hill, I'm going to stay seated because there's another berm coming up. And what I'm doing when I'm going up the hill is I'm really pushing through the foot peg. I'm pulling on the handlebars to generate as much rear wheel grip, keep the front wheel as light as I can up that hill, so it drives. Next corner, stick it into the corner again, and then I'm standing up. I'm in between whether that corner over there with a tire and a yellow dot is it's usually a sitting corner, that corner. But today, I've done it both seated and stood up. I feel it works equally well. But it is important. Ruts are your friends. Okay? Don't avoid ruts. If you see a rut, try and use it to your advantage, because it's a bit like, especially today, it's a bit like slotting your bike into a train track's electric strap. It'll follow the rut as long as you don't do silly stuff. Keeping in mind, for a rut, if it's a corner rut, there's something there that's going to hold your wheel. Yeah. And so with these bikes, if I'm leaning my bike and I'm increasing the slip angle on flat ground, the bike wants to slide. That's why I move my body weight back over, down, try and prevent that as much as possible. And when the ground comes up with you, you can stay more central on the bike, because your relationship to the ground isn't changing. As long as you lean appropriately to the angle of the ground, you can remain flat, and the ground will hold you. So when you ride a berm like that one there, it's quite a steep berm. As long as you lean with that berm, your bike will just rail around there, no problem, right? So these ruts do the same thing. But if that's your rut, say your rut's coming in this sort of direction here, and you're coming into this rut, and you're slotting your front wheel directly into that inside edge of that rut, think about what's happening. Think about a car with a trailer. If the car turns, the trailer takes a shortcut, or a bus. Front wheels and the rear wheels, you've got to go really wide, right? Same thing with a bike. They do the same thing. So if I slot my front wheel into the edge of the rut, my rear wheel is going to try and take a shortcut. It's going to constantly try and climb up the inside of that rut, make the bike feel very unstable. So if I give the bike just an inch or so higher, the front wheel an inch or so higher, the rear wheel has a room to ride the inside of the rut, and the bike will feel more stable. Okay? Alright, so I'll do a couple of demo laps. Look at where I'm sitting, look at where I'm standing, look at when I'm sitting, how I'm sitting. I'm sitting forward. Look at my elbow position, and just look at generally how I'm moving my body weight around on the bike.
Sok szabadás a hátsó keréken. Nope. Folyik be a nyakamból hideg víz.